in this current setup, we have a very harsh top light aiming straight down, illuminating the scene, although our catcher plate here, our shadow catcher, is perfectly illuminated. Our shadows are way too harsh for this scene. Also, the objects aren't being lit with the same quality of light as our background images. So first of all, let's see what we can do to lighten up these shadows a bit. What I'm going to do is duplicate my top light. Clone current item. Go to my scene editor. I'm going to have one of these lights be casting shadows and the other one not casting. So I will name the first one top light shadows. Now, since now have 200% light shining down here, which is overblowing the scene quite a bit. So what I want to do is balance these two out. Also, both of them are still casting shadows. So this is my shadow, so I want the ray trace turned on. I go to my second one. I'm going to set that to off. Let's see what this does now. When you render it, it's still overblown, as in there's too much light obviously coming out here. The shadow is brighter. What we want to do is balance this. So let's just take a shot in the dark, go 50-50 with my top light and the light that will be casting the shadow. So those two lights will add up to 100%. And you can see my 1 meter plate is still at the proper intensity, but the shadow is half as dense. Now that looks a little bit too gray to me, so I think I want to balance these out. Top light 75%, which means the shadow light is 75%, which means the complementary light should be at 25%, so that adds up to 100%. And it's darker, and that's good. Looks similar to what we see there, maybe over in the corner. Let's try rendering one with anti-aliasing on. You should always check your work occasionally with anti-aliasing, because there are occasions where the anti-aliasing changes the quality of the image. Well, of course it makes it look smoother, but sometimes it makes it look a little different, especially when you're dealing with bump mapping or almost anything with images. And you can see it. You know, this is not a terrible composite, particularly where this big white plate is. It's a little too clean. The light is a little bit too completely white. So let's play a little bit with the other lights in illuminating these light wave objects. The first thing I'm going to do is add some lights that will only affect the current 3D objects that I want them to affect, which is the apple and the plate. So I'm going to add a point light, just call it point, and this is going to represent kind of the light bouncing off of the I believe this was a refrigerator over here. Just the properties. It's going to be fairly weak. I'm going to make it, give it a yellowish tinge. The important thing is, under objects, I do not want it to affect the 1 meter square. Also, I do not want it to cast shadows at this point. I think we'll need to have it over here. I am then going to add another light. Actually, I will add another light and another point light, and we'll call this blue upper. Oop. Which will be kind of up in the air, and we will also give it kind of a blue tinge. Now most of the time You don't want your lights to be completely 100% white. That's very unnatural. Does not happen very often in nature. Also going to turn off the shadows for this, and once again exclude it from the 1 meter square, and probably take this down. Let's check our work quickly. And it's not looking too bad. Seems to be a little bit too much light going on the plate. That's a very diffuse object, but we're still, our 1 meter plate is still very clean. It is still matching the background image, so we're happy about that. Compared to, that's before we added the extra lights, here a few more lights. I think we're going to add one to the back to have kind of a bounce behind light. So we will add, this time let's just add a distant light. A distant backlight, and once again, we do not want it to affect the 1 meter square. We're going to turn off the shadows. Maybe we'll leave this one a little high and just tweak the colors just a little bit. And since it's distant light, it doesn't matter where it goes. We're just going to move it over here. Maybe a little bit more angle there. Check our work. Okay, let's take a little more light off that plate. And I bet you we could take, what would happen if we go in to the top light, not the one with the shadows, that one, and tell it to ignore the dinner plate. And we're getting pretty close right here. I'm still not liking the harshness of the shadows around the apple and the plate, but that's due to using a distant light. To match this softness, we probably would want to use either a spotlight with shadow map where we can soften the edges, or ideally an area light. However, they take much longer to render, and we want to get through these tutorials fairly quickly. One thing I'm going to add to help sell this composite is there does seem to be a little bit of reflection in the shiny countertop. So we can do that. And we can do that by going into our surface editor, selecting the meter square, and just telling it that it's going to be reflective. And in environment ray tracing, I'm going to select ray tracing plus spherical map. But the trick is I will not be selecting any image as a spherical map. Remember, when you want ray traced reflections, you have to turn on ray traced reflections in your rendering options. We want ray traced shadows and ray traced reflections. And let's see what we get now. I set the level of reflection to 25%, and we're getting a little bit of reflection here. So let's take another pass at this. We'll turn on our soft filter, enhanced low, do our render. So our countertop is having some reflection. The shadows are being ray traced. We have our lights. We have lights that are specifically for our objects, and we have some that are specifically for the countertop. And what's our image looking like here? This is starting to look pretty close. Part of the problem here is this apple itself is looking really, really fake. However, it is something nice to use as an example. I think one thing I'd like to do is give it a little bit of reflection blurring. One thing that I found out that reflection blurring is a render hog. reflection blurring is a really nice thing to add into your render. Here is a render using reflection blurring, and you can see it really adds a lot of realism, especially in this particular surface, which is a shiny surface, but nonetheless it is wood, so you're going to have it very soft as opposed to this, which had zero blurring. This one may not be showing up as well on the tutorial. That's at 10%. This is at 30% reflection blurring. Now realistically, something like this plate and even the edge of the apple, something that shiny and glossy would have some reflection also going on. And that's something we're going to get to a little later when we're setting up our reflection boxes.